Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday again. It's John. I forgot how long ago it was, to be honest, but a long time ago, maybe a couple months, I talked about a book that I read that was about Arthur, King Arthur. It was a tabletop book, and I showed that it had a lot of really full page colored illustrations of Arthurian legends and things like that. And I think I mentioned that I was reading another book by another guy on the same topic, King Arthur, but that would had a slightly different tone. I don't remember how much I said about it. But I finished that book and I wrote up a bit of a review and I wanted to talk about it. This book was actually I found it in the bibliography section of the course book in the Great Courses Plus, which is like the Netflix version of the Great Courses. If you've never checked out the Great Courses Plus, go subscribe. It's if you can find them when they're on sale, you can sign up for $10 a month for the rest of your life, and you get access to every course that's ever come out. I found this. They have a course called King Arthur's Britain or something like that, and every single course comes with a huge reading list, a supplemental reading list at the end. This was suggested as one of the great books in the history of sort of writing about Arthur. It's by a man by the name of Leslie Alcock, and it is a Penguin book, as you can see. Classic history. It's called Arthur's Britain. It came out in the early 70s, 1971 or 72. For a lot of Arthur enthusiasts, the scholarly consensus about where he stands will be kind of less than satisfying, as the professor who gives the Arthur class in Great Courses will readily attest. If he even existed at all, and it's not even remotely clear that he did for certain, then he was almost certainly what you would refer to as a dux bellorum, or a war chief or a battle commander, and was not in all likelihood a king. The characters that have grown up around Arthur and his legend were also added on over a period of centuries after Arthur's life, some of whom we have little to no original evidence for, and some of whom appeared 500 years after Arthur would have lived. They're just sort of like these literary and cultural accretions onto the Arthur story. The real Arthur didn't know almost anyone that is mentioned in the myths, in the legends and the stories. In the opinion of Leslie Alcock, one of the greatest British archaeologists of the 20th century, who dedicated his entire life to the archaeology of looking into these Arthurian legends and working on, what you could call the problem of Arthur. According to Alcock, such a person did exist, but there's still the fact remaining that there was no Lancelot, there was no Merlin, there was no Galahad. All of these people were added on later. A quick word up front, just to save the very casual reader any interest, and I did consider myself a very casual reader in this area. Just in case you're just interested in the basic outlines of Arthurian legends, this isn't the book you would be looking for. In these pages, specifically, there's no Guinevere, there's no Lancelot, no Mordred, no Gawain, no Morgan Le Fay, no Merlin. This is almost entirely, at least half, going on 2/3, a book that details the archaeological survey and archaeological findings of the sites that we most associate with Arthur today, like Glastonbury and like Tintagel Castle in Cornwall. As an introductory guide to the legends themselves, or the various books and poems in which you can find them, this book is very nearly useless. This is very, very archaeology heavy. Maybe the most approachable part of the book, and the information that will be of interest to most audiences, that is, non-scholarly audiences, is the discussion of sources and what today we call source criticism, which is in the first 50 pages or so of the book. These are almost an entire course, really, in how to navigate a text with the tools of contemporary source criticism. Source criticism asks, if you've never heard the phrase before, it asks questions like, how much reliability do we lose with newer versions of texts as opposed to old ones? How can you tell a text is older or newer? What do writers do? What did scribes do when they came across a text and they couldn't translate a certain word, or they didn't know a certain word? Did they make it up, or did they skip over it? And how is, you know how you used to play telephone as a kid? Well, you have that same issue with texts that are copied down through centuries. Meanings are distorted, meanings are shifted, meanings are downright, amplified or tuned down accordingly. And source criticism is largely about figuring out those problems and reverse engineering those problems to get back to the closest meaning and closest facsimile of a text that we can have that would have been closely contemporary with Arthur. A few of the sources that Alcock looks at in the book are the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the British Historical Miscellany, the Easter Annals, and the De Excidia et Conquestu Britanniae. And he looks at some of the historians, of course, that wrote these books, especially one by the name of Gildas, or Gildas, who is nearest in time, I think, to when Arthur would have actually historically walked the earth, if he did. The information in the first two chapters is also where you get the book's pure history of Arthur, with information about Britain straddling the fall of the Roman Empire, which happened first third of the 5th century. This book specifically goes from 367 to 634, with Arthur being somewhere, we think, in the 6th century, I think is where most people come down on where he would have lived. Right in the decades after Rome pulls out of Britain, because they no longer have the military resources, the monetary resources to occupy it. The rest of the book, like I said, however, more than 200 pages, consists of, I hate to say it, it was a real slog to get through, guys. It is almost wholly records of pottery shards. It is pottery shards and more writing about pottery shards. While it never loses really its readability, I think the fact that the last half to 2/3 is so specific, a lot of people are going to lose interest in what he has to say about this part of the book. I guess, it's amazing to think that so much work has been done on little pieces of pottery, but this book is actually largely about that. And if on the one hand you want to know about the archaeology, the history of archaeology in Arthurian studies, and I do say history of it because this book is nearly half a century old, it seems like this might be somewhere you want to start out because it was listed as a very well-known text for precisely that reason. But if you want a rough and ready intro to the history of Arthur, the actual history, and a history to the other characters that are involved in the legends, this is not that. I just wanted to emphasize, I don't mean to sound repetitive, but I don't want anyone wasting their time in thinking that this is what you're going to get if you pick up this book. Like I said, I just wanted to give a quick Greater Courses sort of shout out. No, they don't pay me. I am invisible to them, I'm sure, me in my little corner on BookTube. But for those of you who do not have a subscription to Greater Courses Plus, please Google it. Like I said, it is the streaming version of the Greater Courses. And so it's sort of like Netflix, but it's associated with the set of lectures that the Great Courses puts out. There's an entire 24 lecture course on Arthur called King Arthur History and Legend. That's the name of the class. And it's presented by Dorsey Armstrong, who's an English professor at Purdue. And it's absolutely fantastic, and it's well worth the 12-hour investment. Just watch an episode or two every day. You'll be done with it in a week or two. It's not quite what I thought it would be, but there's some good things to take from it nonetheless. Arthur's written by Leslie Alcock. If you've ever read this or any other good Arthur books, fiction or nonfiction, I'm interested in Arthur. One of the many things I'm interested in. So please leave a note below, and we'll talk about him. I will see you next week. Bye.